Come with me as I head into this pawn shop in search of video games. First off, they had a pretty big Xbox One collection and a bunch of games. They also had a ton of consoles. But while I was trying to video this, there was a lady literally like standing over me. So I apologize for the pretty rough camera work here, but I was trying to get this while I could. They also had a bunch of Switch consoles, whether it was Switch Lite or regular Switch, and they didn't really have any games other than one golf game that was definitely not interesting. Then I headed over to the PlayStation 4 section, which again, they had a ton of PS4 games here, and honestly, this is quite a decent collection, but nothing that jumped out at me. Then I ended up seeing the consoles here, a bunch of loose discs as well, and they even had a PS5 controller as well as one PS5 game. Then behind the counter, they had some PS5 consoles and some Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons that needed to be repaired, so let's check them out. I ended up buying all 5 of these Joy-Cons for $10 each, which meant I spent $50 on unworking Switch Joy-Cons. And basically every one of these definitely needs to be cleaned and the joysticks need to be replaced. So I went on Amazon and bought some joysticks. Now, these were $14 for a 4-pack, which meant I spent $3.50 on each individual one. So that means when they're all fixed, I'll have spent $13.50 on each individual Joy-Con, which is about $27 for a pair, which we have 2 pairs. We've got one gray pair and then one blue and red one, and then a Volt Joy-Con by itself. So let's go ahead and test these out and see what's actually wrong with them. Hopefully it's just the sticks and or I can clean the other problems with it. So let's go ahead and pull out my Switch, hook these up, and see what's wrong with them. Okay, so as you can see, I've got my Switch right here and all the Joy-Cons. Let's go ahead and start with these red and blue Joy-Cons. I'm going to go ahead and slide it on to the console itself. And let's see if both will pair, and they do. So I'm going to go ahead and go and check out the settings. We're going to go System Settings, go all the way down to Devices or Controllers and Sensors. And then we are going to first update the controllers. Okay, so I can't do that yet. So we'll do that in just a minute. It looks like we might have some stick drift right away here. So I'm going to start with the input devices. Let's go ahead and start with the controller buttons. Left, right, up, down, X, Y, B, A. I don't know why I did it backwards. We've got the R and the ZR, and we've got the ZL and the L button. I'm going to test these joystick clicks, but probably not needed. So it looks like everything on the buttons for these two are working, which is totally amazing. Obviously, I'm going to redo these sticks, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull these off and call that good. These will both need stick replacements, so I'm just going to write that down. And then I'm going to stick that right here. Obviously, if there was more than one, I would do that, but since we've just got 2 here, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the black or the gray ones. These are actually gray. Sorry about that. And do the same exact thing. We're going to go down all the way to controllers and sensors, and then we are going to go to the input test devices or test input devices. Left, right, up, down. These are a little sticky, but they are working. Same thing over here. These definitely need to get cleaned. This one does not have the joystick button working. Actually, neither of them do. So those look to be 2 things that aren't working. But everything else, every other button is working. So when I replace them with those sticks over here, that will fix that issue as well. So we're actually doing really, really good considering that we started with Joy-Cons we'd never tested before, but it is what it is. That's okay. I'm going to put this gray one on here just to keep it level, and we'll do the exact same thing here, all the way down to controllers and sensors. Then we'll go to test input devices, test the buttons, and So they all seem to be working. They are really sticky, which, I mean, it is what it is, but I'm going to go ahead and take these apart and we will get those new sticks in. Thankfully, none of the buttons are busted. That's a big deal. So let me go ahead and sit down and we will get to working on these. So that actually shocked me that only the joysticks were messed up on these Joy-Cons, which is pretty awesome considering I've got replacements here that were pretty cheap. So what we're going to do is go ahead and take these Joy-Cons apart, put the new sticks in them, and then we'll test to make sure everything is working after that. Before we start, I do want to say that these Switch Joy-Con replacement sticks did come with some extra stuff that honestly I don't really need. I'm just here for these 4 sticks. It came with some extra screws if you need those, as well as some joystick Joy-Con covers, but I'm not interested in those, so this kit did have a little bit more, but let's go ahead and start by taking this Joy-Con apart. I've got my Fantic screwdriver here, which is totally awesome. It's electric screwdriver. And then I've got 2 bits. I've got a Phillips head and then a tri-wing. The tri-wing you have to use on the outside of the Joy-Con, and then you use the Phillips head everywhere else. So it's pretty straightforward. We're just going to go ahead and unscrew the 4 screws here, and then we'll take this casing off. Once we've gone ahead and taken those 4 screws off, you just pretty much pop this apart. I usually get my fingernail under one of these corners and just pop it open, and then you can kind of pull it apart here. There are 2 ribbon cables here you want to be sensitive about, so I'm going to go ahead and grab a little needle nose pliers to go ahead and pop those off, and then a flathead just in case I need it. So these are pretty straightforward, but one is underneath. So what I like to do here is go ahead and switch to the Phillips head already, and then we're just going to go ahead and put it in, and then we'll go ahead and unscrew this screw down here at the bottom, and then I believe there's a screw underneath this battery. No, there's not actually. So I'm going to go ahead and unscrew this one, and then this one as well. And then this piece should pop off just like this. Everything is sticking together, probably because of this ribbon cable. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off completely, I guess. And then we're going to go ahead and kind of flip this just a little bit like this. You do have to worry about these wires. They do come off. If you want to, go ahead and unplug the battery. And then that just slid off, which is kind of interesting. I wonder if someone's tried to fix this before. But I'm going to go ahead and pop off these 2 ribbon cables here. Slide them right out. It should be pretty simple. I wonder if someone's tried to fix this before, because it does look like there is some damage on the inside, which is interesting, but nothing I can't fix. Then, as you can see, you've got 2 screws here, which go to the joystick, and then the ribbon cable as well. What I like to do is try to go ahead and pop off that ribbon cable first. That way I'm not damaging anything. Even though this is a busted joystick, I don't want to mess up that ribbon cable slot. So we're going to go ahead and unscrew this right here, and then do the same thing on the other screw. And then pretty much this joystick will come right off because it's missing that rubber gasket. If the rubber gasket was on it like this, you can see it gets a little bit stuck there, but that's okay. It's pretty easy. We're going to go ahead and put everything back together. So take the new joystick, slide it in that slot, and then go ahead and make sure that it reaches and fits nicely in that ribbon cable slot. We're just going to close that right up, and then we are going to do exactly the opposite of what we just did. Go ahead and grab those screws and screw everything back in. Normally I would wait to put these ribbon cables back on here, but since that one is busted, I'm going to go ahead and put it on now. That way I don't have to mess with it when it's much harder to do, because honestly, it could be a little tedious with these ribbon cables, and you want to make sure you don't break them. So while I've got the chance, I'm just going to go ahead and hook these back up. And then upon looking at this a little bit more, it does look like someone's attempted this because this is busted. It looks like, but this shouldn't be very hard to fix. I'm going to go ahead and try to get this realigned here for this ribbon cable. I have a feeling this is going to be like the hardest portion just because of how it kind of wraps around and plugs in down there. So what I like to do is kind of hold it here and then try to slide it in. This takes a little bit, so bear with me. After several attempts, I finally got this to go in. This is probably the hardest part. And then I'm just going to kind of set everything back in there. I do wonder if someone tried to repair this a little bit, but obviously everything else was working, so I'm not upset there. I'm gonna see if we can get this in right now. Oh, there we go. The battery is set in. I've got to make sure I put the ZR button back in, or actually that's just the R button. Let's get that back in. And now all I have to do is put those 3 screws back in and then make sure everything is working good, and we should be good to go here. So now, like I said, we're just going to screw those back in. This is a little difficult because of some of these little wires and stuff, but honestly, this isn't really that hard. You just got to make sure if you unplug something, plug it back in, and then you should be good to go. Now, honestly, I'm going to go ahead and plop this back together, and everything should be working, but I'm going to grab my switch and we're going to test it out before I do put it back together completely with those screws. So the stick is working, which is definitely something that was not happening earlier. I'm going to go ahead and test all of those buttons because we did take it apart. So we've got everything working here. Let's go ahead and make sure the stick is calibrated and was working good as well. You got to do the same thing, but instead of scrolling down and hitting test input devices, you're going to go ahead and hit calibrate control sticks. Then you're going to tilt it, and then you just kind of do this. And since I haven't done anything with it, I'm going to go ahead and calibrate it. This is really straightforward. You just follow the directions that it tells you to do. And then once you're done, it should be like this. And there's no drift or anything. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and screw this back together, and then we will do the rest. Now that we've fixed all these busted joysticks, let's go ahead and plop these controllers on and make sure they are good and updated. As you can see, some of these were already good, which is kind of interesting to me. And then others still needed the update. These two must have came from the same switch. Then I want to see if this one's going to work. Okay, interesting. Let's try this blue one. Are they all going to be up to date? Oh, okay. All right, what's the guess? Is the red one going to be up to date or no? I'm guessing it will. Oh, okay. So it looks like this one needs to charge a little bit more, and then we'll be able to be updated. It's been a few minutes, so let's go ahead and turn this thing on and see if we can get this one Joy-Con up and running. And it's still too low, so I'm going to leave this and we'll finish up this video and I'll make sure this is all good. But honestly, I don't think this could have turned out any better. All I had to do is replace the sticks, which means I've got only $13.50 into each one of these Joy-Cons, which is totally amazing. $27 for a pair of Joy-Cons that probably need to be cleaned up a little bit is pretty good. Now, I was expecting more problems, but this turned out to be really worth it. Now, I updated all the controllers except for this red one, which I don't know why the battery wasn't charging. Maybe the battery needs to be replaced in it. I'll give it some more time and figure that out. But overall, I feel like this was a pretty good deal. Paying $10 each was a risk, but for the sake of the video, I figured let's go ahead and do it and see what was wrong with these things. So I'm really glad that these are working now. So if you've got any ideas on what I should do with these Joy-Cons, leave a comment down below. But I'm going to get these things cleaned up and get out of here. So make sure you check that video out if you haven't already. But this is why I like going to pawn shops. You never know what you're going to find. Sometimes you find some really good stuff. And honestly, this turned out to be really good. So I'm getting out of here, so check out that video out if you haven't already.